Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ethos Online. Again, this is a space where we can be, belong, and become the very best version of yourselves. So again, wherever you're joining us, whether it be at your office, at your home, in your living room, wherever you're joining us, welcome. Thank you for moving through these books and these verses with us. Again, we believe the Bible is packed with so much goodness, so much wisdom, so much direction on how to live life right here, right now. And these ancient people understood it. And so we move through, we ask deep questions, we look at the culture, we look at the context, we do all of that. And so again, thank you for joining us in this really deep study, specifically today over Genesis. So before we begin though, please remember to click on the little links below if you want to continue helping support what we do. Again, we spend countless hours doing what we do. Putting everything together, all the slides, researching, all of the podcasts and the ethos sessions, all of it. It's so much work, so much energy, and so continuing to help support what we do is so helpful. And so today we continue our journey through the book of Genesis. Again, the book of origins, right? And so Genesis, we remember Genesis is written for a specific reason at a specific time. And so some of you could probably teach others almost this exact same thing as you've heard it maybe 10 times now. But I'm going to say it again because repetition is key, right? Repetition is the key to learning. So here we go. People, Israel, again, over and over again. Israel is a group of people who are broken down. Tribes of people over and over again. These large empires, they will look at these small tribes. They will step in and they will begin to conquer them. And then they essentially make them assimilate to that empire. And so Israel is one of those small tribes who often is kind of eaten up by the big empire. And so we've seen it with Egypt. We've seen it with Babylon. We see it with Media Persia, the Greeks, the Romans. This poor group of people, right? They keep getting swallowed up by these empires. And so from the beginning, though, in Genesis, they essentially, what happens is Babylon comes in, they take Israel, they destroy their temple, march them hundreds of miles on foot. They get them to Babylon, and everyone else is assimilating. But Israel says, we have a story. We have an identity. We are Jews. And so we want to hold on to what we believe. We believe that our identity, our values, it's all worth keeping. And so what this group of people does, these Israelites, is they begin to compile all the stories. They put them in these 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. They call it Torah. And Torah is where life is. And so, again, the stories, the poetry, it's all there. It's a written response to, again, the fears of assimilation. And so they put these stories together in these scrolls, right? And again, poetry, song, mythology, prophetic musings, prophetic warnings. You know, like if we continue down this road, this is what's going to happen to us. And so this group of people, they don't want to assimilate. They don't want to be another Babylon. They want to continue keeping Jewish tradition Jewish. And so they write their stories. They write not literal history, but they write their values into story and song. They write their traditions into the epic narratives. That's what they do. And so, again, Torah, we talked about this over and over again. Torah is a complete narrative of Israel. Israel miniaturized through its tellings. And so, again, it's so beautiful. When you understand this, when you pick up the Bible now, when you read Torah, you'll realize every one of these characters is a beautiful picture of Israel. Whether it's Abraham, Moses, Adam, all of them have an element of what Israel has gone through. It's a lesson. It's Israel miniaturized through story. Yeah, it's beautiful. And so again, every time you read it, whether they were there literally or not, whether there was a man named Moses or not as important as what the story tells us about Israel and then what we can learn about ourselves. That's the deeper journey we go through. And so we moved through Genesis 1, and man, so many of you gave me some really good responses to this. And again, it's packed with meaning, right? Israel's God, unlike the Babylonians' God, Israel's God steps into the chaos, doesn't create it, steps into the chaos and begins clearing the table, right? Clearing space. And once space has been cleared, then this God begins to bring order to life, right? Can begin to put things in place. It's a beautiful picture. And so Genesis 1 was a poem. We know this by the writing. Genesis 1 would have been more like an epic poem. Now, Genesis 2 is different. Genesis 2, again, very different than Genesis 1 in many ways, but Genesis 2 is even written in a different form. Genesis 2 would have been the campfire story, where people come together and they hear the oral telling, right? Dad leans in, he tells you about the fish story. It's this big. No, I mean, it's this big. It was a whale, right? It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we know, again, Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, there's a lot of dissimilarities between the two. If you're trying to take it literally, it actually begins to fall apart. And so we know that man and woman are created at the same time in Genesis 1, whereas Genesis 2, God creates man first, then later woman. There's all these different dissimilarities because, again, it wasn't meant to be historical. That was never the point. We don't have to have science and religion at odds. They actually go hand in hand when you understand why the story is written. It's beautiful when you get it. So today we're going to move into Genesis chapter 3. Now, Genesis chapter 3 is packed with meaning. And so I'm only going to look at 5 verses today. 5 verses, but they are jam-packed with meaning. You ready? Okay, here we go. I'll read to you Genesis 3, 1 through 5 to start with, just so you get an overview. So it goes like this. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat from the trees in the garden, but God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die." "You will not surely die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good from evil." So, Genesis 3, 1 through 5. So let's look at this. First off, Genesis 3, 1. It goes like this again. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other wild animals. Why a serpent? Right? Was this Satan really a literal serpent? Well, man, some people believe that, but if you ask the actual writers and you ask the actual Jewish people who are the most worthy of understanding the text, when you look back at their study, these rabbis, what you'll get is that the serpent, it's not a literal picture here. The serpent is a deep metaphor. Think about this. If I am a tribe of people, I'm roaming around the desert on my camel. Let's say I'm on a camel. I'm roaming around. What is the one animal that's going to cause me the most grief in the middle of the desert? Right? Your camel's carrying all your stuff. It's got all your water, all your goods, everything. Right? It might even be carrying another kid on there. I don't know. It's carrying a lot. What happened often were these vipers, these snakes, would be laying just under the surface. And if a camel walked on them, and then venom, poison, and the camel's down. It's dead. And so who is carrying that load now? Yeah, you are, right? And so these vipers, these snakes, they did their best to step on the heads of these things. They hated snakes. Snakes were deceiving and cunning. Right? They would lay at the surface ready to strike. That's why a snake. It makes perfect sense when you understand the culture and you understand the context. Perfect sense. And so why the snake be the antagonist? Well, of course, it's going to spread doubt, right? It's going to be the Loki of the story. It's going to be hide at the surface, waiting to jump, waiting to pounce, waiting for just the right moment. And so notice the question. It's a really purposeful one. Notice it. It's intended to cause doubt. Yeah, it's intended to cause doubt. Did he really mean that? Right? Doubt their previous experience. Right? They walked with God all over the garden. They walked with, again, God being wisdom, the deep wisdom. Right? They walked with God in wisdom all over the garden. But now, notice, they're not with him. Right? And so this comes a perfect time to begin to doubt our own journey, doubt our own experience. Did it really turn out like that? I know last time, you fell into this same cycle, but maybe it'll be different this time, right? You've heard those voices before. We've all fallen for them over and over again, and many of us will continue. It just happens. It's life. And so the question is, do I really need wisdom this time around? Maybe I should just jump in and do it, right? They're walking without wisdom. And it's an easy time for them to miss the point, right? It's an easy time to miss. And so what we have here in this picture, what if we take the knowledge, right? But we choose not to allow wisdom to walk with us? What's going to happen here? What's going to happen when Adam and Eve, they question their better judgment? They take on this knowledge. They push the red button, right? The red button's there. And they're thinking, should we push it? Should we not? Should we see what happens? Right? What should we do with this red button? Without wisdom, without a wisdom voice there saying, what, hold on. Let's think about the consequences. Hold on. What happens every time you push that button? But the wisdom voice is not there. They're not allowing it to be there. Good, right? Let's keep going. The woman said to the serpent, we may eat from the trees in the garden. So notice this. Again, this is a deep metaphorical story. We can eat from all of the trees in this garden, except for one, but we can eat of any of these trees. So think about this for a moment. There is knowledge that's available, right? Again, these trees meant, the idea here was knowledge, right? Enriching knowledge, things that bring goodness, wisdom all around me. We can eat, we can partake of all of this. This knowledge, it's been there. We've experienced it. We've experienced through the ages. There are wisdom voices that you've even expanded on it, right? There's knowledge that we know, and we know it's safe. We know this knowledge. We know it to be true, right? So a child that touches the pan, we know because we've touched it before, right? We know because we've heard wisdom voices say, "Don't touch the hot surface," right? Don't touch the stove. It's hot, right? We learned that. That fruit is safe. We know that now, right? We know washing our hands is an important thing to do right now, isn't it? We know that helps stop the spread of certain viral infections and other things, colds, whatever. We know it helps sanitize the hands. We know why it does, and so we continue doing it. It's common knowledge. We would call that common knowledge. We know that when Mary Poppins jumps up in the air and she has her umbrella, we know that's fiction. Why? Because some of us jumped off of really high things and we hurt ourselves when we were young, right? That's knowledge we know, right? We are safe to assume no umbrella is going to catch us anymore. This is common knowledge. We've experienced these trees. God, the divine wisdom, has told us those trees are safe trees. However, watch. The serpent says, God did say you must not eat from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die. Notice this. Again, Eve is responding here. God said, we shouldn't eat from this tree because we're going to die. If we eat from this tree, certain things will happen. There are consequences. And again, there's a deeper image here. Don't miss it. Don't miss the deeper image. Sometimes in Israel's history, and sometimes in our own lives, we are introduced to new knowledge. Yeah? New knowledge can be a bit dangerous, right? New knowledge that we have yet to experience. And if we haven't experienced it yet, there's probably not much wisdom guiding us unless we've sought it out. Interesting, right? And so it's that moment you walk into the clearing, you see it, right? It's that new thing and it's waiting, and now all these questions arise. You come upon the thing and you're like, whoa, right? The first time you heard about the universe, right? You open that box. You ask questions and all of a sudden you realize it goes on for how far? What do you mean? Like infinity? What does that mean? Where was the beginning? Where's the end? It doesn't have a beginning, it has an end. It's also expanding and exploding and dying all at once, right? The whole thing begins to pop, and before you know it, you just open a big can and you don't know what to do with that information. Unless, of course, you allow wisdom to walk with you. Think about this one. First time you walked in on your parents. What a horrifying experience. Or the first time you heard about the sex word, right? You were horrified. You're like, wait, what? All adults are doing this? Most of them? What? That's where they came from? That's a terrifying image when you are a child, unless you have an adult voice walking with you, helping you process and give you wisdom. Yeah, it makes sense. Those wisdom voices are there to help you. We're made of atoms, all of us. That thing's made of an atom. I'm made of atoms. How come I can't see through myself? You begin to learn all these interesting things. You have all these questions. You open the can, right? And now it's scary. You opened it and you can't undo it, right? Wisdom, we need wisdom to guide us. But if you simply open it up, right? And so here's Satan's response. You will not surely die, the serpent said to the woman. You won't die. Notice again, the serpent, he's only addressing the woman at this point. Because remember, man and woman, they were supposed to be connected. They were supposed to be one, right? Nurture and passionate, fire, energy. You have those two walking together with wisdom. However, what did Satan do here, right? What did the great deceiver, the snake, what did they do? The cunning one. Divided, right? Wisdom's no longer even around, right? God's wisdom's not even there. And now he's broken up the man and the woman. Yeah. Do you see what happens when we are divided? When churches are divided, when families are divided, when nations are divided, we begin to be weak. And so we have to find ways to be united, because when we're united, we can stand and we can allow all the wisdom of the past to help us walk in the present conflicts. But if we're divided, holy smokes, we've seen what happens, right? Yeah, he divides the two. And so again, what happens when there's division? It gets a little out of control. And think about this. Secondly, we have the blue and the red pill, right? This is the blue-red pill moment in the story. This is where Neo, right, and Morpheus, they look at each other and he says, Neo, you can keep going down the rabbit hole. You can keep learning and seeing the universe and the world bigger, or you can go back to sleep. Take the blue pill like it never happened. But once you take the red pill, Neo, once you take it, there's no going back. And so think about this one. Think about the words of the deceiver here, right? You will be like God, right? You will see good and evil. You'll see all of it, right? Because here's the thing. Once you see something, you can't unsee it. Once you learn something, you can't unlearn it. And so for many of us, there were books that we purposely held off reading. We knew we weren't ready. Wisdom told us that. There were certain ideas we said, you know what, I just can't go there, right? There's certain actions we just said, I'm just not going to do that right now, or I may never, right? There's certain things that, again, once you partake of it, once you experience it, once you know the thing, and many of us in Ethos, we know this, right? We knew once you understood the context of the Bible, certain things died and other things gave birth. But again, in order for life to grow, some things have to die. Some things have to be unraveled before you can create the new thing. We use the sweater analogy a lot in Faith Undone. The sweater analogy is so perfect for this, right? You pull the string a little bit. This is what Adam and Eve do. They pull the string. And once that string is pulled on that sweater, you know it's going to happen. In the next month, you are going to find yourself either walking by something, getting snagged. It gets further and further. Before you know it, you've just got a neck warmer, right? No more sweater. It pulls. It pulls undone. And that first pull is what started the whole thing. And at some point, after the whole thing's undone, you can then rebuild. But the pulling is painful, isn't it? Yeah, and if you don't have wisdom voices walking with you in that new knowledge, it can be really painful. So continuing on, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened. You will be like God, knowing good and evil. So here's the thing. Patience, right? The idea here is at some point, maybe in this story, the divine would have been like, all right, guys, time to eat from this tree now. right? Again, it's a story, right? It's a story. The idea that the divine would like, hey, fresh off the assembly, I'm gonna let you go free and let Satan tempt you and good luck. No, like the whole universe is now at fault because you ate a fruit. I'm sorry, that literal picture is pretty destructive. But the deep metaphor tells us this. Sometimes when we're about to experience new knowledge, when we're about to take it in, sometimes we have to have patience. Sometimes we have to stop and we have to call on wisdom voices to say, hey, help me navigate through this. This is terrifying for me. You've gone through this. Can you navigate it with me? Because right now it's scary. And this is where, again, the nurture and the fire and the passion, when you can put that all together with wisdom, when you can walk with a community of people through the deconstruction process, through the unraveling, that's when life happens. We do it together. But when we're divided, man, it's so easy to be feeling very, very alone. And that's why we learn to do it together. We seek wisdom. We find ways to meet other people who have gone through similar things. When that thing, whatever it is, whether it's your idea of God is unraveled, right? Your view of the Bible, your view of humanity, your neighbor, your family, whatever the thing is unraveled. Your deep philosophy in the world, right? Whatever it is, if it's unraveled, stop, seek wisdom voices. So we always do this. We always say, how do we take it home, right? How do we apply this right now? Because verses 1-5 are really rich. And I think we proved that today. There's a lot of depth just in the beginning of chapter 3. We haven't even hit like the actual moment when everything kind of goes to crap, right? We haven't hit that yet. This is just the startup of the story. So what do we do? How do we take it home? Well, I would say this. How do we experience wisdom, right? How do we experience wisdom? How do we gain it? That is a deep, deep theme all throughout the book of Genesis. And so a couple concepts I would share right now that I find every time I read the Bible, especially like Proverbs and other wisdom writings. Number one, I would say this: accept uncertainty and the unknown. Proverbs 2:10, it says this: for wisdom will enter your heart and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul, right? Accept that some things you just may not know right away, right? You might have to sit with it. You might have to sit with it and just live with the unknown. To move beyond knowledge and information to wisdom, you have to move beyond black and white thinking. You have to. Real wisdom tells us, again, it's not always black and white. It's not always going to be a cut and dry thing. Sometimes we have to have patience and sit with it and understand that in the gray, we're going to find deep meaning and beauty. But it's only through learning to say, sometimes I don't know, right? I don't know is sometimes the richest answer we can give. Number 2, seek humility and embrace wonder. I like this in Proverbs 15:33. It says, wisdom's instruction is to fear the Lord, and humanity comes before honor. Again, seek humility, embrace the wonder. You don't have to know everything. I remember for many years, I thought I had to be the expert on everything. I had to give my opinion everywhere. But that's not wise. That's not humility. That's actually arrogance. And arrogance is always one step away from a big, big fall. Yeah. And so you will never meet a wise person who isn't humble. Think about that. All the wise people you know in your life, like the deeply wise mentors, usually a trait that always follows them is that they're very humble people. As you grow in wisdom, you will grow in reverence and awe, reminding you how little you know and how loving this higher power must be. Again, it's so obvious once you experience it. You think, wow, this picture, this image, I am in so deep awe of it now. I really know very little, right? There's so much more for me to learn. And when you can say that, you begin to live in humility. Number 3, listen and ask questions. When you realize you don't know everything, begin asking questions of those that you think do, right? Be a student of the world, not master of it. Because once you attempt to be master of it, everything loses meaning. But if you're a student of the world, means you are constantly asking questions of everything you do, everything you see, everything you read. And when you're asking questions, you are growing. The world is getting richer and richer and richer. Proverbs 19:20 says this, listen to advice and accept discipline. And at the end of the day, you will be counted among the wise. Yeah, ask for advice. Seek wisdom. Wisdom implies listening, right? Not talking. I struggle with listening. I want to be heard, right? Most of us, I want my voice to be heard. I want to share my experience. Just shut up for a moment, right? Stop talking and just listen. True sages, they don't struggle with this. They have a lot to learn. They realize you can't learn with your mouth open. That's the idea there. Stop, ask questions, listen. The fourth one, I think this is a really good one. Surround yourself with hopeful, life-giving people. The naysayers, the ones who are constantly like, those people are not helpful. Surround yourself with people who are constantly filling you with hope, constantly igniting that wonder in you. Those are the people we need to continue surrounding ourselves with. Proverbs, again, 13:20. I love Proverbs, these wisdom writings. They're so deep. This one says this, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, right? But the companion of fools will suffer harm. The people you choose to connect with are the people you will begin to look like. It's like the weird guy and his dog, right? They've lived together for 20 years. Before you know it, the two begin, you can't even tell who's who, right? They begin to look like each other. And the same thing, wisdom follows wisdom. When we can continue to have friendships that are wise and life-giving, we will begin to emulate the very same thing. So wise people surround themselves with life-giving voices. And then the last one is this. Learn from the past, but never live there. I'm going to say it one more time. Learn from the past, but don't live there. You don't have to. Ecclesiastes says this, 7:10. It says, do not say, why were the old days better than these, right? For it is not wise to ask such questions. Again, don't live always wondering, well, what would have happened back then if I'd done this or this or this or this? If you live in that space, you will never have room for the new thing to happen, right? That's not wisdom. That's arrogant. It's shame. It's driven by guilt. It's not the way of life. And so wisdom does not entertain nostalgia. It really doesn't. She's a dirty liar, right? You almost always see the past through rose-colored glass. And often we do, don't we? We forget the difficulties, the hardships we went through to get us there. We'll often say, oh, if only, right? You see the best of yourself. Again, in other words, all the crap you walk through, it just disappears. So realistically, though, it was there. And so remember that, right? When you're tempted to look back and say, oh, it was so much better then, it probably wasn't, right? Or if you're tempted to feel really guilty and shameful about the past, that's not a good place to live either. The past is not where we live. We can refer back there to remember stories, remember lessons, but don't live there, right? That's not the way to find wisdom in life. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a lot of fun. And as always, please consider donating to ethos-church.org/donate. Give those tax-deductible donations. Walk with us in this journey. Your donations are so helpful for us to keep this going, continue sharing this with so many people. We do YouTube, but we also have other people joining in a bunch of other ways. It's been so good. And if you want to be a part of the live conversations, or if you want to just join and just sit back and listen, join us. Consider going to our Ethos Live sessions, our living room sessions. That's twice a month. We do it the first and the third of every month on a Saturday. It is an awesome group of people. All of us asking questions, digging deeper. It's just life, right? And as always, consider subscribing, hitting that bell on YouTube. We'd love to have you continue walking with us. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us here at Ethos Live. This was so much fun, and we will see you next week as we continue in this book, Genesis, specifically chapter 3. Everyone take care. See you next week.